In June 2018, India's first geared electric motorcycle, Surge, was unveiled by eMote Electric. Their team did more than 3 years of research and development on this electric motorcycle. Surge can offer 300 kilometers of range with swappable batteries and runs with a top speed of 120 kph with an acceleration of 0 to 60 kph in just 3.9 seconds. Express charging, telemetry, and 4G connectivity are some of its features. In 2020, eMote Electric has revealed the final prototypes of Surge 10K and Surge 6K. To know more details about Surge, we have interviewed the CEO of eMote Electric. So let's see what he said. So hi Pranav, thanks for connecting with electric vehicles.
Thank you, Krishna. I'm very happy to be here.
And for me, it's a privilege to introduce the man behind India's first geared electric bike, the Surge. And straight away, my first question to you is why a geared electric bike to India?
You don't waste any time in coming down to the main matter of this, do you? So anyway, I'll answer why that is. That's a bit of a complex question, so it will take a little bit of time to answer this. But there are three main reasons why. One is to do with efficiency. The other is to do with the fact that if you think about motorcycles, you think about gears, right? That is part and parcel of the motorcycling experience. So our main point was to lower the barriers that prevent people from buying electric vehicles. And if you're buying a motorcycle but you don't have gears, that kind of becomes a mental barrier. So we still wanted to preserve the familiar ride and feel of a motorcycle. That's why it's there. Then the third is just so that we could put in a smaller drivetrain, frankly, to be honest. We did not want to compromise on the acceleration. We did not want to compromise on the top speed. Generally, if you don't have a gearbox, you have to pick one of the two, or you have to put in a really big motor and everything else that goes with it, right? So a really big battery and a really big controller to do all that, and that will really shoot up your cost like anything. So by doing this, we can bring down the cost to a level where we can compete with petrol vehicles on price and performance. I can go into a little more detail about exactly how we do that. But let me come to the first point that I mentioned, which was efficiency. Now, probably maybe the smart ones in your audience would be thinking, okay, it does not make a lot of sense. You're putting in more mechanical components and you're saying you get better efficiency. This does not make sense, right? You would be absolutely right, but then it's like most things in life, it's not as simple, right? So while we do put in more mechanical components, and they do leech off a little bit of power and a little bit of, efficiency goes down slightly, but we more than make up for it in the efficiency gains that we get by running the motor at its, let's call it the happy RPM, right? So we can do that 4 times as long. So if you see most motors, they will lose their efficiency as you go towards the towards either end of that performance envelope. So whether when you're riding really slow or when you're riding really fast, close to the top rated power output, you won't get great efficiency out of it. You'll probably get it best at around something like 60-70% of its power level. So, but if you have a motor that's designed to do 120 kilometers per hour, 60 to 70% is about 80 kilometers per hour. How many times do you do 80 kilometers per hour, right? So in our case, you could be doing 25 kilometers per hour. You could be doing 50 kilometers per hour. If you put it in the correct gear, you will end up with much better efficiency. And that could be as high as 30-40%, to be honest. So even though we lose a few percentage points due to the transmission, we more than make it up in just running everything at its optimal RPM.
Okay, fair enough, and that's a smart answer as well. So does the Surge 10K offers 100 kilometers of real range on its top speed of 120 kilometers per hour?
Okay, let's put it this way. In one word, the answer would be no for that specific scenario that you mentioned. But let me tell you what that 100 kilometers per range is, where that figure comes from. Yes. So that figure is what you could expect on a regular, like on a normal basis, right? Not if you're trying to break speed records with our bike, but if you're going to take it around day in, day out, what you can expect is 100 kilometers on a full charge. So that includes a whole mix of driving. That includes singles, doubles, headlights on, headlights off, regenerative braking on, off, just a whole lot of things, slow acceleration, fast acceleration, just a whole lot of things. There's so many variables in this. So we did not think, we felt 100 is practically what you can expect if every time you charge it fully. That said, if we went by, say, the ARAF figures, we would be right about 140, 145 kilometers per charge. So, but those are not really that easy to achieve in real life, because you don't want to be driving a bike that does 120 kilometers per hour. You won't be happy driving that at 25, 30 kilometers per hour, right? So it's not fair to say that we can give 140. That's not to be expected.
Yeah. Okay. So what makes Surge unique from other electric bikes? Is it just the gear or anything special?
The gear is certainly one part of it that by itself makes us quite unique. But I think what makes us really unique is that this bike was developed over so much first-hand experience that I've had riding an electric vehicle. My experience with, well, one way or another, let's put it with electric motors. There is a funny story behind this. I'll tell you some other time if you're interested. But so basically my experience and my respect for electric motors, the kind of power they produce, the kind of torque they produce. So that's kind of how it was born. And I am an industrial designer, so I don't look at this as an engineering problem. More I see it as a product problem. So we have great pieces of engineering. Motors, nothing new. I mean, it's been around for at least 100 years. But it's how you put all this together. So think of it as, say, if you think of each bits of technology as, say, one, let's say the motor is like a tomato, right? So so I'm giving the analogy of a restaurant here, right? So you can get the best produce you want. You can get rubbish produce if you want. I mean, but let's say if you go to a restaurant, it's the skill of the chef, not the farmer that you're going there for, right? So it's how you put everything together, how you put the spices together, the tomatoes along with, I don't know, whatever else together. And I think that's where we are much better than the rest, because it's just this mix that sets us apart. And if you want me to get into the specifics, it's that because I've been riding an electric scooter for so long, and I did not like it. It was horrible, by the way. Therefore, I know exactly what makes a difference, what makes a bigger difference in your real life. So what is the things that we should prioritize first? So for us, that was always, it should have great performance. And why not? It's an electric motor. It should have good range and it should charge fast. Otherwise, it's not really practical. I mean, you want something that is reliable. In India, we don't keep a second vehicle for the weekends, right? It's our daily driver. We need it every day. And it needs to be reliable enough, not just in terms of, say, not breaking down ever so often, but just that when you want it, it should be there, right? It's not that when you want it, you have to wait for 6 hours for it to charge. I mean, what is this? Fun fact, this is a little beside the point, but maybe I should mention this. So my scooter that I had, I still have it, by the way. It's not serving a great purpose right now, but anyway. So that had a top speed of 40 kilometers per hour, right? And it took 8 hours to charge. So so let's look at it this way. So if I on my electric scooter and you were to have a race, okay? So you are walking and I am on my electric scooter. But if I had to charge my electric scooter first, at what point do you think I would catch up with you?
Entire night it will take, I guess.
Entire night. Okay, I'll make it really easy for you. There's no need to calculate. I would never catch up with you. So assuming you don't have to stop for food or dinner or whatever, it takes me 9 hours to cover 40 kilometers. You walk at 5 kilometers per hour. You could do 45 kilometers in 9 hours. So I would never catch up, frankly.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I got your answer.
Anyway. Yeah, we can move on to the next one.
Yeah. So you're making two electric bikes, the Surge 10K and Surge 6K. So what exactly the difference between them?
There is not much, to be honest. Frankly, they are both great vehicles. The Surge 6K is a bike that would allow you, I mean, it comes at a slightly lower price point. I'm able to bring it at a lower price point because the performance has been, well, it's not quite up to the mark. It's not quite as much as the Surge 10K. So the motor is a little less powerful. It's about 40% less powerful. And therefore your top speed reduces by about 20 kilometers per hour. So your top speed is 100 kilometers per hour. Whereas for the 10K, it's 120. Apart from that, gears, you get 3 gears with the Surge 6K, you get 4 with the 10K. Yeah, besides, and yes, your acceleration will be a little bit lesser because you have less power, so less torque as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Everything else is the same. You get the same amount of range, you get the same kind of swappable battery packs. Everything else is the same. Yeah, you do save about 20,000 if you take the 6K. I mean, that was the main point.
Okay, that's good. So you have unveiled Surge bike in June 2018, and why there is a delay of 2 years for its launch?
Mainly because we knew that we still had a lot of work to do. There is a big difference between making a prototype and actually getting it out on the road. So I'll give you a little bit of insight what goes into why there is such a big delay. Because once we have the prototype, it's mostly us and maybe a few other companies that are working to bring this together. Right? We outsource some of it, like machining and all that. But when we start looking at volume production, then there is a whole different thing, because not only do we need to make sure that all our parts are good, we can't repair one after, I mean, we can't repair like 10,000 vehicles after they're already out on the road. It's super expensive and it kills companies, frankly. So we need to do all our homework beforehand. And we need to make sure that all the molds, we have to make molds so that we can start producing them for a reasonable price. And it's just a whole lot of things. We need to work with so many other companies. So far, I think we've been working with about 70, 80 suppliers to get all our components together. There's also the issue of certification. So we need to make sure that all our parts are proper. And then we need to go in for certification. And this certification is a necessary evil, frankly. I mean, many people will try to say, okay, why do you need certification? But the main point is to make sure that companies don't put substandard products in the hands of people, right? You wouldn't want a wheel to fall off when you're doing 100 kilometers per hour. So that's fair enough. We understand that. The point is, we need to work with a lot of our suppliers to make sure that everything is okay before we can certify it, and then only then can we sell it. And getting this whole supply chain together is a lot of work.
So as a founder of an EV startup, what's the toughest decision you have made?
Well, that itself is a tough one. But I think the toughest decision was, I guess, just to say no to a lot of investors, frankly. We had to say no to a lot of them because either we felt that they were not on the same wavelength, or they did not subscribe to the same train of thought, the same thought process that we had. So yeah, I guess we just have to say no to a lot of them. So I don't know, maybe time will tell whether that's a good decision or not. But I think I certainly did not want any compromises in the product that we wanted to deliver.
Yeah, that's truly appreciated because you have never compromised for your vision. Yeah. So do you think
Yes.
the Surge 10K is a tough competitor for the RV400?
Well, it depends. I'm not sure we exist in the same kind of performance bracket as the RV400. Price wise, I guess we only have a small premium over that. So I guess that's ultimately up to the users to decide whether that small premium is worth what all we offer. So I guess your users can tell us that whether it's worth it.
Okay, so it's up to the consumers you're talking about.
Yes, absolutely.
So when can we expect the first delivery of Surge 10K and Surge 6K?
That frankly is a tough one even for us. We have no idea because we really don't know what's happening with the whole supply chain issues due to the whole coronavirus situation. And it does not seem like the situation is getting any better right now. So like I said, the whole reason it takes two years or so, or 3 years to get this vehicle out is because we depend on the supply chain. We need to make sure the supply chain is in place. And what's happened right now is that the supply chain is getting affected quite a bit. Plus, we have the disadvantage of being a really small player, right? we are not one of the big three Indian, or I mean, or even the other Japanese auto companies. So we don't have so much pull with the suppliers. So we can't tell them, okay, once you get your factory started, you first pieces you give them to me. That does not happen. We are at the back of the queue. So yeah, we're not sure when everything comes back to normal, but our target right now is December-ish, December 2020, or it could even go into January or February, to be honest. We are trying to do the best we can, but yeah, right now it's not really so much in our hands.
Okay, as you mentioned COVID-19, I believe every crisis will brings up an opportunity. Do you think this COVID-19 pandemic helps the electric vehicle adoption?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, there's a saying that well, I forget what it was, but I think it went something like never waste a good crisis, because there's opportunity. Well, the other part of it, the unsaid part, is that because there's opportunity in every one of them. And I think for us, this is a bit of a net positive, to be honest, because one thing is, well, the petrol prices are going through the roof these days. Yeah, and they're not going to come. They're not going to come down, to be honest. So certainly, when petrol prices become so expensive, and also when people are tight on money, then the low cost of ownership of an electric vehicle really shines, right? For example, to run 1 kilometer, it would cost you on an electric bike about 10 paise, versus a petrol vehicle that would cost maybe 2 rupees, 2.5, right? So people are all well and good when they've got money in their pocket to spend on petrol, but suddenly when things get a little bit tight, people are start thinking about this. And also now because of this, unfortunately, public transport is going to be affected.
Yes,
And it's going
exactly.
to be severely affected.
People are preferring own
Yeah.
transport.
Yes. And I think many of these people are going to end up on two-wheelers. They're going to end up on motorcycles
Yes.
or scooters.
So I will ask you one more question. Like, what's the answer you give to people who says electric vehicles are expensive?
Well, to be honest, they are. So I would say that, yeah, they are kind of right about it. And the main reason they're expensive is, one is because there isn't the same kind of mass production in electric vehicles as there is in petrol vehicles, right? That's one that adds to the cost quite a bit. Besides, just the various components of an electric vehicle, like the battery itself, that's really, really quite expensive right now. So, and especially the lithium batteries. I mean, we can't do without lithium batteries. We need that kind of performance from the battery. Otherwise, we can't do 120 kilometers per hour. We can't do that on lead acid batteries, right? So for us, it's a no-go. We have to have lithium batteries, and they are quite expensive, frankly. I mean, but the prices are dropping really, really fast, actually. So I think from what it was, I believe 8 years ago, they've become about a quarter of what they were 8 years ago. So roughly when I started this, I had all the calculations done for a certain capacity of battery, and we've been able to increase that by 33% because, well, the prices dropped, and we could go in for slightly better battery packs as well, slightly better bid.
Okay.
So yeah, they are expensive right now, but they will come down, and we are certainly working towards it. That has always been our goal, to try to match petrol vehicles, and I think so. Right now, we can match about 150 to 200 cc vehicles, certainly on price and performance. Going into the future, maybe a year or two later, we should be able to match 125 or 100 cc vehicles as well.
Okay. So here it is one more. So when can we expect an electric bike with the price of a petrol bike?
So I think I just answered that, actually. So yeah, hopefully we'll be the ones to bring it by next year, I suppose. I think we're already there in the 150 to 250 cc segment. Yes.
Yeah.
It's not far off. I mean, even if it's not us, I don't think it's that far off. But certainly in the next 3 or 4 years, I think we should be able to match petrol vehicles.
Okay. And anyway, actually, my questions are almost complete. But our EV community members have some interesting questions for you.
Sure. Let's hear them.
Yeah. So here is the first question for you. Is Indian market ready for electric vehicles?
Oh yes, absolutely. I think the market is ready. I don't think the products are there yet, right? So I don't think the products are ready for the Indian market. Yeah, but once we bring those, it will be there.
Yeah. So do you got any support from the government?
Well, in one word, no. So we are not funded. We don't. We don't have any grants or incubation support from the government. So far we have been doing everything independently. Um, yeah, there has been no direct support, but I believe that the government is working towards electric vehicles. So maybe there has been some indirect support somewhere.
Okay.
But yeah, nothing directly.
How much money is required to set up an EV startup?
Well, that depends. That depends on what you're trying to do and what your definition of a startup is. See, there are plenty of companies right now in India that have started with, I don't know, as little as maybe 50 lakhs. I don't know how much they've spent really, but they don't really make anything themselves. So they just import Chinese ones, build it, assemble it, sell it. I mean, they don't even build it; they just assemble and sell it. And that's true for most of the, I think, except for 5 or 6 people in India today. That's true for most of the startups, right? EV startups. But if you want to do your own development, and the reason they don't do their own development is because that is expensive. It does not come cheap. So you are easily talking into crores. I think that way we have done a very good job because, well, we have spent a fair bit, but nothing on the order of magnitude that other startups similar to us have done. So yeah, it's not cheap. You need to be sure. Yeah, you need to be a little brave to get into this, honestly. And yeah, it's quite risky.
Yeah. So when can we see charging stations in every part of India?
I hope as early as next year. I know that the government has passed a tender for 2,600 plus EV charging stations to be built over the next year. So that is a good number, frankly. To get it on every street corner, that might take a little bit while. But I think this is a good start, 2,600 plus. So yeah, hopefully it will be within 2 to 3 kilometers of everybody soon enough.
So is Emote Electric is planning to set up any kind of EV charging stations starting from Tamil Nadu?
We are not, to be honest. So what we have done is we have built in let's say a standard compliant battery pack. So these 2,600 plus charging stations that I just talked about, we can use every single one of them, right? And we can fast charge at every single one of them. So yeah, we don't see the need to roll out our own charging stations. And honestly, that is not something that we want to do because that is an infrastructure game, right? That's not what we do. We're not an infrastructure company. We are a bike company. We are an electric vehicle company. So that I'll leave it to somebody else. But that said, we can use every single one of these chargers that have been put out. Not only that, if we use those fast chargers at their full power setting, and if the user has configured their vehicle with 3 battery packs, or if there were 3 battery packs in the vehicle, you can charge all 3 in parallel. So that gives you 300 kilometers in 1 hour. I think we are far and above the fastest, charging vehicle in that sense.
Yeah, that's really brilliant.
Yeah, I think people will really like that. I mean, it really opens up a lot of possibilities and flexibility with that.
Okay. One idea which can make faster adoption of electric vehicles in India.
I don't know, to be honest. Well, the easy thing is, okay, you give even bigger subsidies, or you tax petrol vehicles. That will push people towards electric vehicles. Or the other obvious thing is increase the price of petrol. But apart from that, okay, so there are 2 ways we can look at this. One is what the government should be doing versus what I guess entrepreneurs or the private players should be doing, right? So the government has been doing some stuff. I'm okay with that. What I really find lacking is the fact that the companies, they're not doing much, right? That's why we exist actually, because we felt, okay, people are not really developing their own products. I mean, it's fine to ask the government for some subsidies or help to get the sector started, but it's one to just rely on that. I mean, you should be developing something yourself. The problem we have right now is that to put it crudely, the companies are See, all the companies and startups, they're serving up, they're serving up, well, okay, they're serving up a shit sandwich and then expecting us to eat it like chocolate cake, right? And then crying, oh, it's not selling. I mean, why would it?
That's so frank.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know, maybe they should keep it on that way. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of how it is.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think the onus is on. I think the onus is on companies to do something to make products more likable, rather than just wait and hope the government to do something.
Okay. So can we expect 100% made in India product without importing not even a single part from outside?
Honestly, that's not possible.
Mhm.
I mean, it could be done with a lot of effort, but yeah, even with the normal supply chains, even with the supply chains for petrol vehicles, I believe there was at least 30 to 40% that came from abroad. And that is certainly true with electric vehicles as well. See, we don't have the lithium mines in India. We don't have so much rare earth material in India. So that would go into the magnets for the motor. So right now, we have absolutely no option. We have to, I mean, if we don't get the motor from abroad, we at least have to get the magnets from abroad. There's no second way of doing it. Same for the lithium batteries. And as it stands, there is, right now, there is, well, with the exception of one lithium battery manufacturing, lithium cell manufacturing plant that has just been inaugurated this month.
Yeah.
There really is no other plant that is operational.
Okay.
So yeah.
So why can't we produce electric vehicles at a low price?
Mainly because we do have to use slightly exotic materials, and we need clean rooms, things like that. The main cost is around the batteries, the motor, and the controller, and that consumes a vast chunk of all the, I guess, of the budget. So there isn't really much left over, and unless we can get these three components down to a good price, it will always be expensive. And the reason they are also expensive is because you need great quality control just for the lithium cells itself. You need great quality control. You need to have really clean rooms. Otherwise you can make lithium cells, but and they may seem okay when you've just taken them out of the factory. But if they're not made well, 2 or 3 years down the line, they will absolutely tank in performance. So you won't get as much life out of it if you don't have all these processes. And clean rooms are expensive.
Okay, got it. So when will an electric bike become affordable in 1 lakh and offers a range of 150 kilometers? I think your bike is the answer.
Not yet. We are still like 1.3, and that's after subsidies, right? So without subsidies, I think that's really, really far off. Maybe.
So you already
5 or
applied
6
for
years.
FAME 2 subsidies.
We haven't finished all that because that happens after your certification is done.
Okay.
But we meet all the criteria, to be honest, and we are localizing our parts. So once all that is done, there is nothing really that stops us from being able to get it. But yeah, the prices are kind of they assume that the subsidy will be awarded.
Okay.
So yeah, so without subsidy, I don't know, it could take maybe 5 to 6 years. With the subsidy that we are currently right now at, it could be done in as little as maybe 1.5 to 2 years probably.
Okay. So are we dependent on any foreign countries for the components?
Yeah. Yes, we are. For electronics, motors, or rare earth materials, yeah, we are dependent on quite a few companies. I think that's the whole thing with globalization, right? You don't have everything produced locally. You have a global supply chain, and that's no different for us. So yeah, things do come from abroad.
That's smart enough. Is it possible to standardize the battery pack size for easy to swap anywhere?
Yes, actually, that is one of the things that we have been working on. So for us, they are standard. But yeah, so for our products, they will be standard. They won't be standard across the industry. That is going to be a very difficult thing to do because everybody has not only different designs of how things, not just the exterior design or the styling, but also interior the design of all the, say, load bearing members, stress components. usability, how they want to remove the battery or something like that. So that all varies right across the board, what power it needs to support. So I don't think there is going to be one standard as such. There probably will be manufacturer specific standards. So like we could have one standard, maybe I don't know, maybe Ather has one standard, but there's not more. Or maybe Revolt has one, Tata has one. But yeah, I don't think there'll be a cross-industry standard.
Okay. So what is the process to set up a startup, starting from fundings and up to importing batteries from other countries?
Process is, well, it's like setting up any other company. You pretty much file with the MCA for, well, a company, you get it. I mean, all the paperwork is done. You get whatever GST number and import-export code you need to be able to start importing stuff from abroad. And I guess that's pretty much it. You can call yourself a startup. You try to register yourself at the DA, at the Startup India website to be recognized officially as one. And that's pretty much it. I guess the question is what you then do with it. In terms of funding is difficult, especially if you are looking at electric vehicles, and that's across the industry. I think there's only one exception, and we all know who that is. But everyone else, they really have funding. It's really difficult to raise funding. Yeah, because the problem is this is a risky business. It's a capital-intensive business, and the VCs in India or the angel investors in India, they don't have that kind of risk appetite, or really what they want to do is they're all geared towards like software or app-based kind of things. So wherein you can put in a little money, see if that translates into some kind of sales or traction, and then you put in some more. In our case, you have to put all the money up front, right?
Yeah.
So, and without seeing a single rupee in revenue. So that is extremely risky for them. They don't like that, and they don't do that. So yeah, funding, I really don't have a great answer for that, to be honest.
Why there is no resale value for an electric vehicle?
I think because they fall apart really fast, and they're not really that great. So I think people who bought an electric vehicle in the past, they realized after 2 or 3 years, okay, this is not really working out as I thought it would. I mean, it's not really that useful. Same thing happened with me, to be honest. Same thing happened 10 years back, actually. If you remember, between say 2007 and 2012, there was probably the first wave of electric vehicles. I would call what's happening today as the second wave. But back then, that was the first wave. What killed it was the fact that, okay, people who bought the first vehicles in 2007 and 8, 5 years later, 3 years later, they realized, okay, this is not working. I mean, this is not usable. I'm going back to an Activa or whatever. And so therefore, it did not pick up. And the reason being that, again, these were not really well-made vehicles. They fall apart. The plastic and all that, just the workmanship is not good. And they were all built to a cost. Right? They're built to be cheap. And therefore, many corners were cut. In fact, many of the body panels, the molds, they're not really for electric vehicles. They're for a petrol vehicle. And for cheap petrol vehicles. So, and because all these permanent magnet motors and everything is expensive, to make it competitive with, say, other petrol vehicles or something, they had to cut major corners in everything else, right? So they just fall apart. And once your battery is dead, you can't, it just sits there. It's not usable at all. Like if you can't go 5 kilometers on your electric scooter, what is the point, right? So yeah, people didn't want them. Even people didn't want to buy them secondhand. People didn't want to keep them who had bought them. So yeah, demand versus supply. So since there is no demand and there is kind of okay-ish supply, there is no resale value. So we are trying to change that. We are trying to have at least a 10-year lifespan for the vehicle itself, as well as at least 5 years for the battery packs. And we are building it all to a level that retains that value.
So will you launch this bike in all the parts of India?
That is the plan, yes. We want to get it into the hands of as many people as possible. However, we are quite constrained in where we can go, where we can launch. So right now, honestly, what we are telling people is that, we would like to see some numbers, as would our investors, frankly, potential investors. So they would like to know that there is demand in the market. And for us, so we have started pre-bookings. We think 6 to 8 months would be a reasonable period of time that people will be okay with pre-booking. So far, we did not do that because we did not have that clarity ourselves, whether we'll be able to deliver deliver in 1 year, but now we are pretty sure about that. What we are trying to do is we're trying to see where we are getting the maximum number of pre-bookings from, and based on that, we intend to prioritize which areas we go to first. I guess so. If anybody looking at this wants us to come to their area first, probably they should try to get their friends also to pre-book, and we'll certainly do that.
Okay. So why an electric cycle price is more than a good petrol bike?
I think it's just the cost of, like I mentioned, it's the electrical components in that cost a lot. The cycle is okay, right? That's not that expensive. It's the lithium battery, it's the motor that costs quite a bit. There are certainly some electric cycles that cost more than, say, a moped. Like I think there's only TVS 50 or a TVS XL, which exists right now. But they can be more expensive. I do know that. Mainly because one is, unfortunately, again, most of these vehicles, they are imported into the country. So you end up having to pay customs duty on them. That adds to the cost. The GST adds to the cost. Sooner or later, you end up with something that costs 35,000, even though a normal cycle would cost 10,000. It's just the electrical components that cost quite a bit. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah. Can India become an EV manufacturing hub?
Yes, certainly it can. I don't see why not. We already are one of the world leaders in regular automobile manufacturing.
Yeah.
And we can certainly do that with electric vehicles as well.
So what do you think about graphene technology? Can graphene be made to adopt on electric vehicles?
Yeah, so I would say that's with regard to graphene in batteries, right?
Yes.
It is quite promising. The problem here is that it's developed in the lab, so it's great in the lab. Now to bring it from lab to actual production level, and that to at a price that makes sense, takes a really long time. So let me give you an example, and by really long time I mean decades. It takes like 15-20 years at least. So if you have heard about graphene right now, how great it is in the laboratory, by 2040 it might be here. So it's not ready for us right now. Let me give you an example. The LFP batteries that a lot of EV companies are using right now, and we also started with those. They were first made in the lab in 94 or 95, early 90s to be sure. And it's already 2020. It took 25 years to get to a point where we can put them in our products.
Okay. So I think here comes the last question from our EV community members. Any vacancies in your startup?
Yeah, sure. We are actually looking to increase our team size. We are actually, like I said, we are working on a bare bones group. We are looking to add in people, mostly probably on the power electronics side. A couple of people. Marketing and business development is something that we are really looking at, because we have not been doing that honestly so far. So we have just been focusing on the product, but now I think is the time to get it out in front of people, to get people to know about it. So we'll be looking at that, certainly.
Okay.
They can, if anybody is interested, they can send us an email, either at our information email, which is info@emotelectric.com or hr@emotelectric.com. So we'll take a look at it.
Okay.
And when we're ready, we'll certainly get back to them.
Okay, I think before we end up, I have one more question for you from my side. So you're giving one battery pack, and so you will get 100 kilometer of range. With additional 2 battery packs, you will get 300 kilometers of range. So what exactly an user has to pay for another 2 battery packs?
Right. So as it stands right now, the batteries would cost roughly about 60,000 each. So if you want 2 battery packs extra, that would be about 1.2 lakhs more. So let's say you bought the Surge 10K and 2 extra battery packs. Totally it cost you about 2.7.
Oh. So it means to say that the battery pack costs itself 50% of the overall vehicle. Okay.
Kind of, yes. So let me clarify that a little bit. It does cost up to 40%, really. So when people buy the motorcycle, and for us the prices are roughly around 1.3 lakhs for the 6K and 1.5 5-ish for the 10K. So when they so that price includes subsidy as well as whatever else, road tax, whatever is applicable. But the subsidy amount is something like 30,000. That is so we factor that in. So normally what would cost 1.8 is now 1.5, and what would cost 1.6 is 1.3.
Okay.
But when you're buying batteries, the subsidy is not there, so
Yes.
you end up having to pay full price. But I still think it's worth it. Because you can more than make up the cost over a year, and just putting 2 battery packs in or a third battery pack in really gives you a lot of flexibility.
Okay, and thanks for answering to our EV community member questions. And it's a wonderful interaction with you. And
Sure.
looking forward to test ride Surge
Same
10K and Surge 6K.
Oh yes, I think it's worth it. We were actually planning on having a little get together thing. We have one of India's only racetracks close to us, about 7 or 8 kilometers away from where we are, in Coimbatore. So, and it's a great track. It's a small track, but it's a good one. And we were thinking of having something like fixing up a date in April or May, something ish. Now I don't know. We still want to do that, but we don't know when that would be. But I guess people can subscribe to a mailing list or something, follow us, and we'll probably put in a line when we are ready.
Yeah, sounds so interesting, and it's really incredible interview, and you have answered these questions in a smart way as well as very informative way, and I'm truly appreciated for that.
All right. Thank you, Krishna. So happy to be here.
Yeah.
I wish you all the luck with the channel.
Okay. Yeah. And go green,
So,
go electric.
all right.
So it's our slogan, and you can also say that.
Sure. Go green, go electric.
Electricvehicles.in motto is keeping the earth a safer place to live for the next generations. If you want to join our movement, you can support simply subscribing to our channel or sharing our videos or commenting on videos. Thanks for watching.